On the morning of October 14, 1907, a woman walked out of the timber country north of Coeur, Idaho, alone. Her name was Vera Lindstrom. She was 26 years old. She had been missing for 11 days. The search party found her 2 miles south of Wallace, sitting on a stump beside the road with her hands folded in her lap. Her boots were caked in mud. Her skirt was torn at the hem. She was not injured. She was not starving. She looked, according to Deputy Marshal Frank Hollis, like someone who'd just come from church and was waiting for a ride home. When Hollis approached, she stood. She did not speak. He asked her name. She nodded. He asked if she was hurt. She shook her head. He asked where the others were. She looked at him for a long time. Then she looked past him toward the mountains and said nothing. There had been 4 of them when they left Wallace on October 3rd. Vera Lindstrom, her husband Carl, a mining engineer named Thomas Altman, and Altman's wife Grace. They were traveling to inspect a silver claim Carl had purchased sight unseen from a man in Spokane. The claim was located in a remote drainage basin accessible only by logging road, approximately 18 miles north of town. Carl Lindstrom was 31. He had worked as a surveyor for the Northern Pacific Railroad before turning to independent prospecting. He was known in Wallace as steady, cautious, and methodical, a man who carried 3 compasses and checked them against each other. Thomas Altman was 44, a graduate of the Colorado School of Mines, employed by the Bunker Hill Mining Company. He had agreed to accompany the Lindstroms as a favor and, presumably out of professional curiosity. Grace Altman was 38. She taught piano. She had grown up in Pennsylvania and had lived in Wallace for 6 years. Neighbors described her as reserved, devout, and not suited to the country. All 3 of them vanished. Only Vera came back. The first interrogation took place in the Wallace jail, not because Vera was under arrest, but because it was the only place with a private room. Marshal Hollis, Sheriff George Tanner, and a stenographer named Raymond Cole were present. Vera sat in a wooden chair with her coat still on. She drank water. She did not touch the bread they offered. The transcript survives. It is 5 pages long. Almost all of it is questions. Marshal Hollis, Mrs. Lindstrom, can you tell us what happened? No response. Marshal Hollis, did you become separated from your husband? No response. Sheriff Tanner, Mrs. Lindstrom, we need to organize a search. We need to know where to look. Vera folded her hands. Marshal Hollis, were they injured? Did someone get hurt? No response. Sheriff Tanner, was there an accident? Vera looked at the table. Marshal Hollis, Mrs. Lindstrom, we're trying to help. We're trying to bring them home. Vera lifted her head. According to Cole's notation, she appeared to consider this. Then she shook her head, not in answer to a question, but as though dismissing something. Marshal Hollis, you're saying no? No to what? No response. The session lasted 40 minutes. Vera answered nothing. When they tried to press her, she closed her eyes. When they raised their voices, she stood and walked to the window. She did not resist. She did not weep. She simply removed herself. At one point, Marshal Hollis asked her directly, "Are they dead?" Vera turned from the window. She looked at him, and she nodded. That was the only answer she ever gave. A search was launched the next morning. 18 men, including 2 trackers from the Coeur reservation, followed Vera's trail backward from the point where she had emerged. They found the campsite on the 3rd day, a clearing near a creek, ringed by hemlock, approximately 14 miles north of Wallace and 4 miles from the claim Carl had intended to inspect. There were signs of habitation, a canvas tarp strung between trees, the remains of a fire, tin plates, a coffee pot, 3 bedrolls still laid out. Carl's surveying tools were stacked neatly beside a stump. Grace Altman's Bible was open on a log, held down by a stone. There were no bodies. There was no blood. There was no indication of violence, animal predation, or struggle. The bedrolls had been slept in. The fire had been maintained. The camp looked, in the words of tracker Joseph Pond, like people who'd just gone for a walk and meant to come back. But Carl Lindstrom, Thomas Altman, and Grace Altman were gone. The search continued for 2 weeks. They scoured the drainage, the ridges, the creek beds. They found nothing. No clothing, No tools, no trace. On October 30th, Sheriff Tanner returned to Vera. She was staying with her sister Anna in a boarding house on Cedar Street. She had not left the room. She had not spoken. Anna reported that Vera ate when food was brought, slept when the lamp was turned down, and otherwise sat by the window, looking at nothing in particular. Tanner brought a county prosecutor, a man named Morris Webb, and a priest, Father Damien Cartier from St. Alphonsus. The priest was there at Anna's request. Anna believed her sister might speak to a man of God. Father Cartier sat beside Vera. He did not ask her questions. He told her that silence was a kind of suffering, and that suffering shared was suffering lessened. He told her that the dead deserved to be found, to be laid to rest with dignity. He told her that God knew what she carried, and that she did not need to carry it alone. Vera listened. She did not look at him. When he finished, she said very quietly, "They're at peace." It was the only sentence she spoke in 11 years. Father Cartier leaned forward. "Where are they at peace, Vera?" She did not answer. "Can you show us?" She shook her head. "Why not?" She closed her eyes. Father Cartier tried for another 20 minutes. Then he stopped. He later wrote in a letter to the diocese that Vera's silence was not evasion. It was, he said, a form of fidelity. Theories emerged. Some believed Carl Lindstrom had murdered his companions, and Vera had helped him dispose of the bodies before he fled. But Carl's finances were examined. There was no motive. He had no debts, no mistress, no history of violence, and Vera had no reason to protect him. If anything, she would have been the first suspect. Others suggested that Thomas Altman had killed Carl in a dispute over the claim, then taken his own life along with Grace's. But Altman had no stake in the claim and no need for money. The Bunker Hill paid well. He owned a home. His marriage, by all accounts, was stable. A few speculated that all three had fallen into an abandoned mine shaft or a sinkhole, and that Vera, unable to retrieve them, had simply walked away. But the area had been surveyed. There were no shafts, no sinkholes, no pits. The most persistent theory, whispered in saloons and church basements, was that Vera had done it herself, that she had killed all three for reasons unknown, and that her silence was guilt. But no evidence supported this. Vera was a small woman, 5 feet 2 inches tall, slight in build. Carl alone outweighed her by 80 pounds. There was no murder weapon, no blood, no marks on her hands or clothing. And there was the question no one could answer. If Vera was guilty, why return at all? Why not disappear into the timber and start again somewhere else? She had come back. She had walked out into the open. She had let herself be found. That was not the behavior of a murderer. That was the behavior of someone who had made a promise. In December, the case was formally suspended. Carl Lindstrom, Thomas Altman, and Grace Altman were declared missing, presumed dead. The claim Carl had purchased was sold at auction. Vera inherited nothing. Without a body, Carl could not be declared legally dead for 7 years. She remained in Wallace. She took work as a seamstress. She attended church. She did not socialize. When people asked her about the 11 days, she did not answer. When they stopped asking, she did not volunteer. In 1910, she moved to Spokane. In 1914, she married a railroad clerk named Howard Finch. They had no children. She lived quietly. She sewed. She kept house. She was, by all accounts, a kind and competent wife. She never spoke of Carl. She never spoke of the mountains. When her sister Anna visited, they did not discuss it. In 1918, during the influenza epidemic, Vera contracted pneumonia. She recovered, but her health was never the same. In the spring of 1921, she collapsed in her kitchen. A neighbor found her. She was taken to Sacred Heart Hospital. She died 3 days later on April 19, 1921. She was 40 years old. Her last words, according to the attending nurse, were spoken in delirium. I kept it. When asked what she meant, Vera did not respond. She closed her eyes. She never opened them again. To understand Vera Lindstrom's silence, one must first understand what was lost. Carl and Vera had married in 1903 in Duluth, Minnesota. Vera was the daughter of Swedish immigrants. Carl was the son of a Lutheran minister. They met at a church social. Carl was working for the railroad at the time, mapping routes through the Northern Territories. Vera was teaching at a primary school. They were, by the standards of the time, a practical match. Carl needed a wife who could endure isolation. Vera needed a husband who could provide stability. There is no record of great romance, no love letters, no poetry, but there are photographs, and in them, they stand close. Carl's hand is always on Vera's shoulder. Vera's hand is always near his. They moved to Wallace in 1905 after Carl left the railroad to pursue mining. Wallace was a silver town, rough and transient, prone to floods and fires. It was not a place for a woman of Vera's temperament. She was quiet, orderly, devout. She did not drink. She did not gossip. She attended First Lutheran every Sunday and taught Bible study to the miners' children. Carl respected this. He attended church with her. He did not gamble. He did not frequent the saloons on Bank Street. He worked long hours, studied assay reports, saved his earnings. He wanted to strike a claim that would allow them to buy land, build a house, raise children. In the fall of 1907, he believed he had found it. The claim was called the Maria, named by its previous owner after a sister who had died in childhood. It was located in a narrow drainage basin on the western slope of the Bitterroots, accessible only by a deteriorating logging road. The claim had been worked sporadically in the 1890s, then abandoned. Carl purchased it for $300 from a man named Silas Thorne, who was leaving for California and wanted to liquidate his holdings quickly. Carl was cautious. He knew the area had a reputation: remote, difficult, prone to early snow. But the assay reports Thorne provided indicated viable silver deposits. Carl wanted a second opinion. That was why he asked Thomas Altman. Altman agreed. He was between projects at the Bunker Hill and had the time. More importantly, he trusted Carl. The two men had worked together before, surveying a tunnel near Mullen. Altman respected Carl's thoroughness. Carl respected Altman's expertise. Grace Altman's inclusion was less certain. Grace did not enjoy the backcountry. She had accompanied Thomas on previous trips and found them taxing. But Thomas, according to a letter he wrote to his brother in Denver, wanted her to come. He felt she had been isolated, that she spent too much time indoors, that she needed air and open sky. Grace agreed, reluctantly. She packed carefully: a wool coat, sturdy boots, a small Bible, a journal. She did not expect to enjoy herself, but she trusted Thomas. She believed he would keep her safe. Vera, for her part, was eager to go. She had accompanied Carl on several prospecting trips and preferred the solitude of the forest to the noise of Wallace. She was a competent camp cook, good with a rifle, unbothered by rain or cold. Carl relied on her. She liked being relied upon. On the morning of October 3rd, 1907, the four of them left Wallace in a rented wagon. They carried supplies for 2 weeks: flour, bacon, coffee, canned goods, bedrolls, tools. Carl had maps. Altman had his field kit. Grace had her journal. Vera had her sewing. They were expected back by October 15th. The weather was clear. The road, though rough, was passable. There was no reason to expect trouble. What is known of their journey comes from scattered evidence. A logger named Emil Richter saw them on the afternoon of October 4th, camped near Placer Creek, about 9 miles north of Wallace. He spoke briefly with Carl, who asked about the condition of the road ahead. Richter told him it was rough but open, and warned him to watch for washouts near the upper fork. Carl thanked him. Richter remembered that Carl seemed in good spirits, that Altman was sketching in a notebook, that Grace was reading, and that Vera was preparing supper. Richter described the scene as ordinary. That was the last confirmed sighting of all four together. The campsite they eventually established, the one found by the search party, was approximately 4 miles south of the Maria claim. Why they stopped there, rather than continuing to the claim itself, is unclear. Carl's maps, recovered from the site, show no notations indicating a reason. One possibility is that the road became impassable. Another is that Carl wanted to assess the area before committing to the final approach. A third is that they simply arrived late in the day and decided to make camp rather than press on in fading light. What is certain is that they stayed there. The fire pit showed signs of multiple uses. The bedrolls were laid out in a deliberate arrangement, Carl and Vera on one side, Thomas and Grace on the other, separated by the fire. This was typical. Propriety mattered, even in the wilderness. Grace's journal, found open on the log, contained entries up to October 10th. The final entry read, "The trees here are very tall. I do not like how they block the sky. Thomas says we will reach the claim tomorrow. I am glad. I am tired of this place. V is cheerful, as always. I do not know how she manages it." There is no entry for October 11th. Carl's field notes, found in his surveying case, were similarly incomplete. The last entry, dated October 10th, read, "Elevation 4,820 as an FTE creek flow strong. Soil composition favorable. Weather holding. T believes vein extends NW from original shaft. Will confirm tomorrow." There is no entry for October 11th. Thomas Altman's notebook, found beside the fire, contained sketches of rock formations, estimates of ore quality, and a crude map of the drainage. The final page showed a drawing of the camp, the tarp, the fire, 4 figures seated in a circle. Beneath it, in Altman's hand, were the words, "Good company, good country, grateful." There is no sketch for October 11th. Vera left no writing. She never kept a journal. She never wrote letters unless necessary. Her voice exists only in the testimony of others, and after October 11th, 1907, it ceases entirely. What happened in that camp during those days can only be inferred. They cooked, they talked, they planned the next day's work. They slept under canvas and stars. They were, by all evidence, a functional group, cooperative, competent, content. There is no indication of conflict, no evidence of argument. Grace's irritation expressed in her journal was mild and private. She did not resent Vera. She did not distrust Thomas. She was simply tired and ready to go home. Carl and Thomas worked well together. Carl's notes reference Thomas's opinions with respect. Thomas's sketches show careful attention to Carl's instructions. There was no rivalry, no jealousy, no tension over the claim. And Vera, by all accounts, was what she always was: steady, quiet, capable. She cooked, she mended, she kept the camp in order. She did not complain. She did not demand attention. She was the kind of woman men relied on and forgot to thank. But she was also the kind of woman who noticed things. She noticed when Grace grew quiet. She noticed when Carl checked his compass 3 times instead of 2. She noticed when Thomas stared too long at the tree line. She noticed when the forest stopped making noise. The exact sequence of events between the evening of October 10th and the morning of October 14th cannot be established with certainty. Vera did not explain. The site offered no clear narrative. The search party found only absence. But absence, examined carefully, has a shape. The campsite showed no signs of hasty departure. The bedrolls were laid out as though people had slept in them. The fire had been maintained. Ash layers indicated at least 2 additional fires after the one used to cook the last meal documented in Grace's journal. Someone had stayed. Someone had kept the fire going. The surveying tools were stacked neatly. Carl's compass case was closed. His maps were folded and placed in his leather satchel, which was propped against a log. These were not the actions of a man fleeing in panic. These were the actions of a man who intended to return. Thomas Altman's field kit was similarly organized. His rock hammer was sheathed. His notebook was closed, not abandoned mid-entry. His specimen bags were tied and stacked. Grace's Bible was open to the book of Job. The passage visible on the left-hand page was chapter 3, verse 25. "For the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me, and that which I was afraid of is come unto me." Whether Grace opened the Bible to this passage deliberately, or whether it was simply where the book fell when the stone was placed on it, is unknown. But the search party noted it. Several of them were religious men. They understood the weight of that verse. The trail leading away from the camp was faint, but discernible. It headed northwest, toward the ridgeline that separated the drainage from the Moriah claim. The trackers followed it for approximately a mile before losing it on a stretch of exposed granite. But before the trail vanished, they found something. A single boot print, deep and clear in a patch of soft earth near a creek crossing. The print was large, consistent with Vera Lindstrom's size. It was facing back toward the camp. Beside it, slightly overlapping, was a smaller print, a woman's boot, also facing back toward the camp. There were no other prints around them, no indication of where they had come from or where they had gone. The trackers searched the area extensively. They found no additional prints, no broken branches, no disturbed undergrowth. It was as though Carl and the woman had materialized at the creek, stood together looking back toward the camp, and then vanished. One of the trackers, Joseph Pond, later told a reporter from the Spokane Chronicle that the prints disturbed him more than anything else he found. It wasn't the tracks themselves, he said. It was the way they were standing, like they were waiting for something, or saying goodbye. Vera's own trail, the one that led her out of the timber and onto the Wallace Road, began approximately 2 miles south of the camp. It did not originate at the camp itself. She had not walked south along the logging road. She had emerged from the forest at an oblique angle, crossing a steep hillside before descending to the road. The trackers attempted to backtrack her route. They managed approximately half a mile before the trail became unreadable. Vera had moved through dense undergrowth, over rock, across streams. She had not followed game trails. She had not followed the terrain's natural contours. She had moved as though she knew exactly where she was going, and as though she did not care about the difficulty. She had also moved alone. There were no other tracks. At one point she had stopped. The trackers found a place where she had sat on a fallen log for some time. The moss was compressed. The log bore the faint impression of fabric. Near the log, they found a single button. It was bone, small, the kind used on a woman's shirtwaist. It had been cut off, not torn. Why Vera had removed the button, and why she had left it there, was not clear. Attempts to reconstruct the sequence depend on inference. One theory: Carl, Thomas, and Grace left the camp on the morning of October 11th to inspect the Moriah claim. Vera remained behind to tend the camp. Something happened at the claim, an accident, a collapse, something sudden, and they did not return. Vera, after waiting, went looking for them. She found evidence of what had occurred but could not recover the bodies. She then walked out alone. This theory is undermined by several facts. First, if Vera had gone to the claim, she would have followed the trail northwest. Instead, she emerged from the south. Second, the search party thoroughly inspected the Moriah claim and the surrounding shafts. They found no evidence of collapse, no fresh earth, no sign that anyone had been there recently. Third, if Vera had found the bodies and been unable to recover them, she would have told the searchers where to look. She did not. A second theory: the group encountered someone else in the forest. A trapper, a drifter, someone dangerous. This person killed Carl, Thomas, and Grace, but spared Vera. She escaped. She did not speak because she feared the killer would return for her. This theory is undermined by Vera's behavior. She did not act like a woman in fear. She did not hide. She did not flee Wallace. She did not ask for protection. She simply stopped speaking. If she feared a killer, silence would not protect her. Testimony would. A third theory: the group experienced something that defied rational explanation. Not supernatural, but deeply disorienting. A sudden illness, a psychological break, a shared delusion. Carl, Thomas, and Grace, in the grip of this event, wandered away from the camp and died of exposure. Vera, resistant or recovering, attempted to find them, failed, and walked out. She did not speak because she could not articulate what she had experienced. This theory has some support. There are documented cases of groups in the wilderness experiencing mass panic, disorientation, or hysteria. The forest can do strange things to the mind, particularly in isolation. But this theory still does not explain why Vera walked south instead of returning to the camp, or why she showed no signs of illness or distress when found. A fourth theory: Vera knew exactly what had happened. She knew where the bodies were. She chose not to reveal this because to do so would dishonor the dead, or implicate her in something she could not bear to confess, or expose a truth she had been asked to protect. This is the theory that best fits the evidence, but it is not evidence. It is only the shape of the silence. On October 18, 1907, a hunter named Douglas McReady reported finding a leather glove in the forest approximately 3 miles northeast of the campsite. The glove was examined by Marshal Hollis. It was consistent with the type Carl Lindstrom wore. It was not torn or damaged. It had been removed, not lost. The glove was found hanging from a branch approximately 6 feet off the ground. McReady said it looked like someone had put it there on purpose, like a marker. When Vera was shown the glove, she looked at it for a long time. Then she folded it carefully and placed it on the table. She did not put it on. She did not take it with her. She simply left it there and walked out of the room. There is one final piece of evidence discovered in 1912 that sheds ambiguous light. A surveying crew, working in the same drainage for a different claim, found a cairn, a stack of stones built deliberately, on a high ridge overlooking the basin where Carl's camp had been. The cairn was not marked on any map. It had not been there in 1907, according to the logging company's records. The cairn consisted of approximately 30 stones, carefully stacked in a conical shape. It was 4 feet tall. At its base, under the largest stone, the crew found a tin box. Inside the box was a folded piece of canvas, clean and dry. Wrapped in the canvas were 3 items: a woman's wedding ring, a man's pocket watch, and a small iron cross on a chain. The wedding ring was engraved with initials, G.A. Grace Altman. The pocket watch was engraved with initials, T.A. Thomas Altman. The cross was not engraved, but it was Swedish, Lutheran, consistent with the type Vera Lindstrom would have owned. The crew reported the find to the Shoshone County Sheriff. The items were catalogued and stored. Efforts were made to locate Vera, who by then was living in Spokane. She was contacted by letter. She was asked if she would identify the items or explain how they came to be in the cairn. She did not respond. The items remain in storage at the Shoshone County Courthouse. The cairn, according to Forest Service records, was dismantled in 1925 during a trail expansion project. No one thought to document its exact location. No one thought it mattered. Vera's silence did not end with the close of the investigation. It became the central fact of her existence. In Wallace, she was marked. People crossed the street to avoid her. Shopkeepers served her quickly, without conversation. Children stared. Women whispered. The whispers were not cruel, exactly. They were uneasy. Vera had become a symbol of something unspeakable, and the town did not know how to hold her. The churches tried. First, Lutheran invited her to continue teaching Bible study. She declined. Father Cartier from St. Alphonsus visited her twice. She received him politely, offered him tea, and said nothing of substance. He stopped coming. It was not that Vera was hostile. It was that her silence created a void, and the void swallowed conversation. Her sister, Anna, was the only person who remained close. Anna's letters, preserved in a collection at the University of Idaho, reveal a woman torn between love and frustration. In a letter dated November 1907, Anna wrote to their mother in Duluth, "Vera is not herself. Or perhaps she is more herself than ever, and we never truly knew her. She works, she prays, she eats when I insist, but she is absent in a way I cannot describe. It is as though she is living in 2 places at once, and the place we cannot see is louder." Anna believed, as many did, that Vera was protecting someone. But who? Carl was missing. Thomas and Grace were missing. There was no one left to protect. Unless, Anna speculated, Vera was protecting their memory, unless the truth of what happened would dishonor them in a way worse than death. Anna never learned the answer. In 1909, she married a schoolteacher and moved to Boise. She and Vera exchanged letters, but the letters grew infrequent. The last one, dated 1919, is brief and formal. Anna had stopped asking questions. Vera had never answered them. The legal aftermath was slow and bureaucratic. Carl Lindstrom could not be declared legally dead without a body or proof of death. Vera could not inherit his property. She could not claim widow's pension. She was, in the eyes of the law, still married to a man who no longer existed. She did not contest this. She did not hire a lawyer. She did not petition the court. She simply waited. In 1914, 7 years after Carl's disappearance, the Shoshone County Probate Court declared him dead in absentia. Vera was granted his estate, which consisted of surveying equipment, a small savings account, and the deed to the Moriah claim, which by then was worthless. She sold everything except the surveying compass. That she kept. When she married Howard Finch later that year, she did not wear a wedding ring. Finch did not ask why. He was a widower, older, practical. He needed a wife to keep house. Vera needed stability. It was, like her first marriage, a practical arrangement. But there was a difference. Finch knew better than to ask about Carl. He knew better than to ask about the mountains. He accepted Vera's silence as a condition of the marriage, and in return, she gave him order, competence, and fidelity. It was, by the standards of the time, enough. The pressure on Vera to speak came from many directions. Journalists sought her out, particularly in the early years. The Spokane Chronicle, the Wallace Miner, and the Coeur Press all sent reporters. She refused interviews. One reporter, a man named Hugh Farris, managed to corner her outside a dry goods store in 1908. He asked her directly, "Mrs. Lindstrom, do you know what happened to your husband?" Vera looked at him. She looked at him long enough that Farris later said he felt as though she was deciding whether he could be trusted. Then she said softly, "Yes." Farris asked, "Will you tell me?" Vera shook her head. "Why not?" Vera said, "Because I promised." She walked away. Farris called after her, asking who she had promised. Vera did not turn around. Farris published the exchange in the Chronicle under the headline, "Survivor Speaks, but Says Nothing." The article speculated that Vera had made a deathbed promise to one of the victims, but it was only speculation. Farris never got another word from her. In 1910, Thomas Altman's brother, Edmund, traveled from Denver to Wallace. Edmund was a lawyer. He was meticulous, determined, and grief-stricken. He wanted answers. He believed Vera had them. He met with her in the boarding house on Cedar Street. Anna was present. Edmund was polite but firm. He told Vera that his family deserved to know what had happened to Thomas and Grace. He told her that they deserved to be found, to be buried, to be mourned properly. He told her that whatever she was protecting, it could not be more important than the peace of the dead. Vera listened. When Edmund finished, she said, "They are at peace." Edmund pressed her. "Where are they at peace?" Vera did not answer. "Did my brother suffer?" Vera hesitated. Then she shook her head. "Did Grace?" Vera shook her head again. "Then what are you protecting?" Vera looked at him. Her expression, according to Anna's later account, was not evasive. It was not guilty. It was something else, something Anna described as resolute and sad. Vera said, "Them." Edmund did not understand. He asked for clarification. Vera did not provide it. Eventually, he left. He wrote to Anna several times over the following months, asking her to persuade Vera to speak. Anna tried. Vera would not. Edmund Altman died in 1916, still searching for his brother's body. In his will, he left a sum of money to anyone who could provide information leading to the discovery of Thomas and Grace. No one ever claimed it. There were others. Grace Altman's sister traveled from Pennsylvania. Carl's father, the Lutheran minister, came from Minnesota. A private investigator, hired by the Bunker Hill Mining Company, questioned Vera 3 times. All of them left with nothing. What they did not understand, what perhaps no one understood, was that Vera's silence was not passive. It was not the silence of ignorance or fear or guilt. It was active. It was deliberate. It was a form of labor. She carried the silence the way one carries a burden. She maintained it the way one maintains a vigil. She protected it the way one protects a grave. And the longer she carried it, the more it became her. In 1918, during her illness, Vera was delirious for 3 days. The attending physician, Dr. Samuel Holt, noted in his records that she spoke frequently, though not coherently. Most of it was fragmented. Names, phrases, disconnected images. Holt did not record most of it, but he recorded one exchange. Vera, half-conscious, said, "I told them I would." Holt asked, gently, "Told who?" Vera said, "All of them." "Told them what?" Vera opened her eyes. She looked at Holt with a clarity that startled him. She said, "That I wouldn't let it be made small." Then she closed her eyes and said nothing more. Holt asked her husband, Howard Finch, if he understood what Vera meant. Finch said he did not. He said Vera sometimes spoke this way, obscurely, as though continuing a conversation no one else could hear. He had learned not to press her. Holt did not include this in his formal report, but he mentioned it years later in 1929 in a letter to a colleague. He wrote, "I have treated many patients near death. Most of them fear it. Some welcome it. Mrs. Finch did neither. She seemed to be negotiating." Vera died quietly. The funeral was small. Howard Finch was there. Anna came from Boise. A few neighbors attended. Father Cartier, though retired, said a prayer. Vera was buried in Fairmount Cemetery in Spokane, under a simple stone that read, "Vera Finch, 1881-1921, beloved wife." Carl's name was not on the stone. Vera had not requested it. Finch, respecting her silence even in death, did not add it. The grave is still there. It is visited occasionally by historians, curiosity seekers, and people who have read about the case. They leave flowers sometimes. They leave notes asking questions. The grave does not answer. 3 months after Vera's death, Howard Finch donated her personal effects to the Salvation Army. Among them was a small wooden box, locked. Finch did not have the key. He considered prying it open, but in the end, he left it locked. He said it felt like a violation. The box was sold at a charity auction. Its contents, if any, are unknown. The buyer was not recorded. The case of Vera Lindstrom resists resolution. It resists because Vera designed it to. She did not lie. She did not evade. She did not obscure the truth with false testimony. She simply removed herself from the narrative. She created a void in the shape of an answer, and she left it empty. This was not cowardice. This was not evasion. This was a choice. What did Vera know? She knew that Carl, Thomas, and Grace were dead. She confirmed this with a nod. She told Father Cartier they were at peace. She told Edmund Altman that Thomas and Grace had not suffered. These were not the statements of a woman guessing. These were the statements of a woman who had been there. She knew where they were. The cairn, found 5 years later, suggests Vera built it. She had their personal effects. Grace's ring, Thomas's watch, her own cross. She had taken these items from the bodies. She had carried them up a ridge. She had buried them in a way that ensured they would endure. This was not the act of someone fleeing trauma. This was the act of someone performing a rite. But why did she not reveal the location of the bodies? One possibility is that the bodies were inaccessible, submerged, buried by rockfall, or otherwise irretrievable without equipment and labor. But Vera could have described the location. Even if recovery was impossible, families could have known. They could have visited the site. They could have grieved. Vera denied them this, deliberately. Another possibility is that the bodies were in a state that would have caused additional suffering, mutilated, decomposed, or marked by violence. Vera, in her mercy, may have chosen to spare the families this knowledge, but this does not account for her statement that the victims did not suffer. If there was violence, Vera lied. And Vera, by all accounts, did not lie. A third possibility is that the location itself mattered. That to reveal where Carl, Thomas, and Grace died would be to reveal how they died, and that the how was something Vera had promised to protect. This is the theory that fits the evidence. What could Vera have promised? In extremity, people make bargains. A dying man asks his companion to tell his wife he was brave. A dying woman asks that her children not learn she was afraid. These are requests born not of vanity, but of love. They are attempts to shape memory, to control the story, to ensure that the last image of oneself is bearable. Vera may have made such a promise. Carl, Thomas, or Grace, or all three, may have asked her to protect them from a particular kind of exposure. Not exposure of the body, but exposure of the truth. What truth? That remains unknowable. But it was significant enough that Vera, who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, honored it for 11 years. It was significant enough that she withstood interrogation, social ostracism, and the grief of others. It was significant enough that she carried it to her grave. She told Dr. Holt that she would not let it be made small. This suggests that the truth, if revealed, would have been diminished, misunderstood, reduced to scandal or tragedy or error. Vera, in her silence, preserved it. She kept it large. She kept it whole. She kept it hers. There is another possibility, darker and less comfortable. Perhaps Vera's silence was not about protecting the dead. Perhaps it was about protecting herself. Not from guilt, there is no evidence of guilt, but from knowledge, from a truth so unbearable that to speak it would be to relive it, and to relive it would be to break. Trauma does this. It creates silence not as a wall, but as a necessary distance. To speak is to collapse that distance. To collapse that distance is to be consumed. If this is true, then Vera's silence was not fidelity to a promise, it was survival. But the two are not incompatible. One can survive by keeping a promise. One can endure by holding something sacred. Vera may have needed the promise in order to live with what she knew. And what she knew, she never shared. The historian's task is to reconstruct, to gather fragments, to weigh evidence, to build a narrative that approximates truth. But Vera Lindstrom will not be reconstructed. She will not be approximated. She left us breadcrumbs, a nod, a cairn, a button on a log, and then she erased the path. She did this intentionally. She understood that some truths are not meant for public consumption, that some stories once told are no longer stories. They become data. They become spectacle. They are picked apart, analyzed, reduced to their least mysterious components. Vera refused this. She kept the mystery intact. She preserved the dignity of whatever happened in those mountains, and in doing so, she preserved the dignity of those who did not return. This is not a failure of history. This is the success of silence. In 1954, a fire burned through the Shoshone County Courthouse. Many records were destroyed. Among them were the case files for the Lindstrom disappearance. The physical evidence, Grace's ring, Thomas's watch, Vera's cross, survived. But the transcripts, the witness statements, the letters from Edmund Altman were lost. What remains is memory, and memory, like silence, has its own shape. People in Wallace still talk about Vera Lindstrom, not often, not loudly, but when the conversation turns to the old timber country, to the claims and the camps and the people who went into the mountains and did not come back, someone will mention her. They will say, "There was a woman who knew what happened, but she never told." And someone else will ask, "Why not?" And the first person will shrug and say, "Maybe she had her reasons." And that will be the end of it. Because in the end, Vera's silence is not a mystery to be solved. It is a fact to be respected. She knew something. She chose not to share it. That choice was hers to make. We are not owed the truth. We are only owed the acknowledgement that a truth exists and that it mattered enough for someone to carry it alone. On April 19, 1921, Vera Lindstrom Finch closed her eyes for the last time. Her final words, spoken in delirium, were, "I kept it." The nurse did not understand. Howard Finch did not understand. Anna, when told, did not understand. But Vera understood, and that was enough. She had kept the promise. She had kept the silence. She had kept the dead from being made small. She had carried them for 11 years, and then she had carried them into the grave. And now, a century later, they remain where she left them, unreachable, unexplained, and entirely at peace.